Tonight, after Beijing put on a show, Donald Trump moves to prove he's not afraid of China.
China needs us much more than we need them.
Those words delivered as President Putin and President Xi flaunted their growing alliance in a clear challenge to the West. Tomorrow, the biggest possible platform to project power as the leaders of China, Russia and North Korea attend a huge military parade. We know how it came to this, an isolationist White House and a punishing tariffs regime. So how does the United States fit into this new world order? We'll discuss that tonight. Plus, powerful aftershocks hit Afghanistan's remotest provinces after Sunday's earthquake, with rescuers still struggling to reach survivors. And the plan to turn Gaza into a tourist resort and technology hub now being circulated in Washington. So what's in it, and is it really being seriously considered? That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening and welcome to the programme. For 48 hours, the leaders of some of the world's most populous nations have been goading the man in the White House. Tonight, flanked by members of his cabinet, Donald Trump announced developments in his plan for a Golden Dome. That's a high-tech missile system designed to protect Americans from attack. Have a listen.
Whoever controls the skies will control the future of warfare.
Well, the US Defense Secretary there on America's strategy in the face of a new military alliance, likely a response to images like these. Russia's president taking tea in the private residence of the Chinese leader. His words chosen to highlight a deepening relationship.
We were always together then. We remain together now.
And tomorrow, they'll stand side by side with this man, Kim Jong-un, whose support has proved crucial to Russia's grinding war with Ukraine. If their armies were combined, the three leaders would command more than 4 million soldiers. Soon, they'll watch an elaborate military parade in China's capital. New weapons will be unveiled. And the message, because, well, this is all about messaging, we are ready for war. So how will the US respond to this alternative view of the world? One with America alone and on the sidelines. We'll discuss that tonight. Let's get started with this report from our Asia correspondent, Helen Ann Smith.
Back on base in Beijing and visibly relaxed. If there is one message Xi Jinping was happy to land today, it is that this relationship is rock solid. There was a sense they went out of their way to show just how cozy things are. The intended audience, no doubt, an American president who had maybe hoped he could disrupt them a bit. Putin is here in part to join commemorations to mark 80 years since the end of the Second World War. But just listen to how he framed it. No doubts over whether China still backs him in the war he's currently waging.
The memory of being brothers in arms, trust, mutual assistance, firmness in defending common interests formed the basis of the comprehensive partnership and strategic cooperation between Russia and China in the new era. We were always together then. We remain together now.
Meanwhile, this city, this army is preparing. Wednesday will host a huge military parade here. Tens of thousands of soldiers, a demonstration of might, a show of total perfection. We were given rare access to film some of the rehearsals to capture the anticipation.
Parade training is the main focus every day. It's an utmost honor to be part of this military parade and to be reviewed by the party's Central Committee, by General Secretary Xi Jinping, and this solemn, dignified and sacred moment.
But the parade will be remarkable for who is here too. None perhaps more striking than North Korea's Kim Jong-un. He rarely leaves his hermit kingdom. He has never attended an event as big as this.
There is a real dichotomy to the messaging here. On the one hand, China has spent the last few days telling the world it is the great bridge builder, the great convener of nations, the great preserver of a peaceful global order. But at exactly the same moment, this city is literally locking down ahead of one of the greatest shows of military might seen in many years that will be attended by some of the most controversial world leaders. It is messaging that perhaps only China could manage.
The parade will bring vast swathes of Beijing to a halt. The police and the army are everywhere. Opinion amongst locals divided.
It's a little disruption for sure, a little impact, but we all understand.
It's a once-in-a-decade event that showcases the nation's strength. The occasional half-day disruption is no big deal.
This city knows the world is watching, and behind the strict precautions, there is a confidence about what it will show. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News in Beijing.
Well, in the past hour, we got a picture of how events in Beijing are being viewed from Washington. Here, Donald Trump responds to a reporter's questions about the summit. Have a listen.
Sir, China's having a massive military parade that President Putin and Kim Jong-un will be attending. Do you interpret that as a challenge to this? And are you concerned at all about those countries trying to be some sort of counterweight?
Not at all. China needs us, and I have a very good relationship with President Xi, as you know, but China needs us much more than we need them. No, I don't see that at all, no. And I had actually a very good meeting with President Putin a couple of weeks ago. We'll see if anything comes out of it. If it doesn't, we'll take a different stance.
President Trump there a little earlier. Let's go straight to Washington and speak with our James Matthews. And James, what we're hearing coming out of China is this is going to be a demonstration of military might. The biggest military parade in history is how it was described to me yesterday by one Chinese spokesperson. And this is the first time we're hearing from the US president responding to that, shrugging his shoulders and saying, I'm not worried about this.
Yeah, hi, Yalda. I think we're going to see the Chinese military might on full display. What we have seen thus far has been its political sophistication in this geopolitical shift, if that's what we are witnessing. And those pictures from China would certainly appear to bear that out, a geopolitical shift from west to east. And Donald Trump, for all he may portray himself as somebody who cares less about growing Chinese influence, he needs an influence in that shift. He needs to remain a player because there's every indication that he's a player who has played his cards wrong. If you just look at the optics alone today, we have superpowers meeting in China. We have Donald Trump hosting a news conference at which he has been banging on about the same old notes, frankly, the National Guard, domestic political issues, mail-in voting, when America, many in the United States, certainly American allies, will be screaming towards the White House, get involved. We're looking at a China which is presenting itself as a stable partner, two nations, India and others, offended by America's isolationist policy. And to that extent, it is a concern. I wasn't at that news conference, but the question for me would have been to Donald Trump, have you not reduced yourself to something of a sideshow right now as world politics are changing? The fact that you are a sideshow, what are you going to do about it? Because that is the question, perhaps the most important question facing the US president right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Americans will say the Chinese are a formidable enemy and that there should be great power, competition and rivalry between the two. And as you say, Donald Trump spent part of that press conference focused on internal issues, domestic issues, including rumours around his health.
Yeah, bizarrely, Yalda. I mean, this was almost the proof of life news conference. Indeed, he was asked at one point by a Fox News reporter, how did you respond to news that you were dead, Mr. President? Because you'll remember, Yalda, as will many others, over the weekend, many rumours that Donald Trump was in a bad way. Indeed, is Trump dead was trending. That's because we hadn't seen him for a couple of days. When you live stream your presidency, if you go missing for a couple of days, that's the kind of response that it generates. He said he was very much alive, had been very active. And interestingly, Yalda, he was shown a picture by that same reporter, video of a bag apparently being thrown out of a White House window. He was shown it on an iPhone. The White House during the week said that had been part of routine maintenance, a bag being thrown out of a window. Donald Trump today said that was AI, artificial intelligence. The truth remains a mystery.
Yeah, well, I believe we can hear that. Do we have that?
No, I've been very active actually over the weekend. I didn't hear that one. That's pretty serious stuff. Well, it's fake news. You know, it's just it's so fake. That's why the media has so little credibility. I knew they were saying, like, is he okay? How's he feeling? What's wrong? I said, I just left. And it's also sort of a longer weekend, you know, it's Labor Day weekend. So I would say a lot of people know I was very active this Labor Day. I had heard that, but I didn't hear it to that extent.
And that was Donald Trump responding to news of his death. James, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Well, as you've been hearing, China will showcase the best of its military hardware tomorrow in a huge parade to mark the 80th anniversary of Japan's formal surrender in World War II. Xi Jinping will be joined by Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin for a display of military might. Sky's defence analyst, Professor Michael Clark, has been looking at what we're likely to see and the implications for the war in Ukraine.
Dictatorships always use their military parades to show the world what they've got and how seriously they ought to be taken. China's 2015 parade concentrated on the missiles that could hit the United States. Its 2019 parade made much of the new drone technologies that it had. And this parade, we suspect, will try to demonstrate how good China could be at going to war very soon in Taiwan, in the South China Sea, or high up in the Himalayas along the Indian border. We expect to see its high-performance J-10 fighter jet, and we might see its sixth-generation Sharp Sword aircraft, a robot wingman to fly alongside its handler. We might see its new PL-15 air defence weapon. And it looks as if China wants to unveil its A-50 directed energy weapon, a laser gun to you and me, for air defence against drones. All very impressive if they work as advertised. But if these displays presage the battles of the near future, the ongoing war in Ukraine points up the battles being fought in the here and now. The Ukrainian battlefront hasn't altered very much since the autumn of 2022, and the battle around Pokrovsk is a prime example. The Russians need to take it for strategic reasons, and after several months that have left the place a complete ruin, they've surrounded it from north and south, but they've still not walked into the centre of the city. And Ukraine's string of fortress cities just north of Pokrovsk, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Drozdkivka and Kostiantynivka, they've all proved impossible for Russian forces to take by every means they've tried since the beginning of the first Russian attack in 2014. Sixth-generation warfare is certainly coming, as the parade in Beijing shows, but it hasn't arrived yet in Ukraine, which is why North Korea's Kim Jong-un, basking in the limelight of being among 26 international leaders in Beijing, is so important to Russia. Because North Korea has supplied 6 to 12 million artillery shells for Russia's war, almost 1,000 missiles, deployed at least 13,000 troops, and has lost maybe half of them, killed and wounded, so far. Over 40% of all Russia's ammunition for this war, say the Ukrainians, comes from North Korea. Over 28,000 containers of ammunition, say the South Koreans, have been shipped to Russia. The fact is, Russia could not keep fighting its war at this tempo without North Korea. So the warmth of the Kim-Putin embrace in Beijing, under the inscrutable gaze of Xi Jinping, suggests that this is all likely to continue.
That was Professor Michael Clark there. Well, our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, is standing by. But first, let's go to our Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett. And Ivor, you and I have been speaking about this in the last 24 hours. While Xi Jinping is the man of the moment and the hour, and this is his stage, Vladimir Putin certainly has had a very good summit.
He has indeed, hasn't he? It felt like he was the star guest at times that everyone wanted a piece of. To me, what we saw today was the two very different sides of Vladimir Putin when it comes to the war in Ukraine. We saw Putin, the negotiator, the side he presents to his partners and the likes of Donald Trump. And we also saw Putin, the invader, the side that Ukraine sees on the battlefield. First of all, the negotiating side. We saw, ahead of a meeting he had with Robert Fico, the Slovakian Prime Minister, he used some of his softest language in a long time when discussing peace talks with Ukraine. He said that Moscow has never objected to Kyiv joining the EU. He said that Russia was ready to cooperate and even work with Ukraine on the issue of who controls the contested Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And most importantly of all, he said that it is possible to find a consensus on the issue of security guarantees, that thorny issue of security guarantees for Ukraine. So all very, very conciliatory, giving the appearance of wanting compromise in what felt like a direct attempt to court Donald Trump and present Russia as the peacemaker. But Europe will doubt, Yalda, that he really means this, because they will point to what else was happening today on the battlefield, Putin's other side, where Russia carried out a rare daytime drone attack. Normally the drones come at night time, of course, but today Ukraine's President Zelensky said they continued into the day, 50 in the morning, dozens more in the evening, and he says that's proof that Vladimir Putin isn't serious about peace. To me, all this shows just how confident Vladimir Putin is right now, how emboldened he is after these past few days in China, carrying out these kind of attacks whilst talking about peace in front of all these leaders, because his ties with China, Russia's chief partner, have deepened. Today he signed 22 cooperation agreements with Xi Jinping, including an agreement to start construction on a massive new gas pipeline, so tying the two countries closer together for years to come. There have been hugs and handshakes, lots of warm body language with Russia's other key partner, India, Narendra Modi. And as I say, he's held several meetings, a string of bilateral meetings with several other leaders. It seemed like people were queuing up to have a piece of him. So to me, it looks like that in the eyes of Russia's partners, it seems Vladimir Putin can do no wrong right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how it feels. Ivor, thanks so much. We're going to go straight to Dom, who's waiting to respond to all of this. And Don, it's really interesting listening there to Ivor and the kind of summit and conference that Vladimir Putin has had. And there's been a lot of pointing the finger of blame at the West, describing America's behaviour as bullying behaviour, pointing the finger of blame at the West at starting the war in Ukraine or trying to, bring Ukraine into NATO. And so I guess in many ways they're offering an alternate new world order in the way that they are speaking and the way that they're using this platform.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to present a new world order. What they're saying is that the world has been dominated by America since World War II, which is true. America and its allies set up the world exactly how they wanted it, and they have dominated. American hegemony, or the Pax Americana, as it's called, has held sway since the Second World War. And what the Chinese and the Indians and the Russians and North Koreans, to a lesser extent, are saying is that it's time for new sheriffs in town and more sheriffs. And they're saying that, and they believe that Donald Trump, who has taken a wrecking ball to much of the established world order that America built and has benefited from so much, tariffs against a liberal trade orthodoxy, his undermining of some of the major institutions, his weakening of NATO, all of that is an opportunity, particularly seen by the Chinese as their chance. So Xi Jinping is exploiting that and banking it for all he can. There's, of course, an enormous irony here, of course, because Donald Trump and the hawks in the administration have always seen China as the primary threat, the thing to be most worried about in the world, the biggest threat to America, more than the Middle East, more than events in Ukraine. And some of the justification for Donald Trump getting closer to Vladimir Putin was that the logic was that he would be able to prize Putin away from China. Now, the opposite is clearly what we've been seeing in Beijing. Russia's been forced more into the hands of China, now really dependent on China to buy its oil, but also China is supplying a huge amount of microelectronics, chips, and other parts that are needed for Russia to build its drones, to build its gun barrels and its tanks. But also China is tacitly tolerating North Korea sending weapons and arms and troops to the Russians. But most importantly, Trump is forcing the Indians into the arms of the Chinese. So Xi Jinping is delighted with this and he's exploiting it for as much as he can, but it is a major challenge to that American-dominated world order we've seen. So you might have expected Donald Trump to talk about this, to raise some concern about it in his press conference we've just seen, or possibly American journalists to bring it up. America's, three top traditional enemies, North Korea, Russia and China, meeting for a very unprecedented and quite extraordinary summit in Beijing. Not a single question was asked and he didn't comment on it. But I think others in America and outside of America, and particularly America's allies, will be deeply concerned by the direction of travel diplomatically in Beijing.
Yeah, indeed. Dom, Ivor, thank you both very much. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme. The view from the United States as Donald Trump suggests he's not fazed by China, Russia and North Korea's meeting in Beijing.
App gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Welcome back. Let's return to this talk of a new world order, one which aims to sideline the United States and give more prominence to China. Well, I'm joined now by Richard Fontaine, Chief Executive of the Centre for a New American Security. Richard, really good to see you. Donald Trump, in the last hour or so, was asked whether he should be worried about this military parade, the coming together of these leaders, the Russians, the Chinese and the Indians, alongside 23 other global leaders. And he said, no, I'm not worried. But should he be worried?
Well, he should be worried. The gathering here is showing a couple of things, none of which are particularly good for the United States. 3 years ago, at this gathering, Vladimir Putin saw Xi Jinping come out and express concern about the war in Ukraine, saw Narendra Modi come out and express around the war in Ukraine, kind of cooled his heels in between meetings. Now he's holding hands with the other leaders. So he's really been welcomed back into polite company at the international level, ending at least some of the isolation of Russia after its invasion of Ukraine. It also shows the warmth, potentially forced warmth, that India has for China, if for no other reason than because of the alienation that the Indians have felt at the hands of the current administration's approach on trade, 50% tariffs, and all this other business that has really set back what has been a strategic relationship over so many years. And then there's the collective appeal to a new world order, which means a world order that is not, in the eyes of those who are gathering, dominated by the United States. And that is a world order quite different than the one that we've seen so far.
Yeah, and I just want to zoom in on a couple of things that you've just said there. I just want to talk a little bit about the way that Donald Trump has pushed India in particular, as you say, a strategic partner of more than 2 decades, a partner that the United States saw as, you know, a power in the region that could counter China. And it feels in many ways like China here has performed a reverse Kissinger, where instead of a wedge being created between Russia and China, for example, or deepening the wedge between India and China, China has sort of embraced India, and Narendra Modi traveling there for the first time in 7 years because of skirmishes on the border, because of a range of other issues. Suddenly, you know, as you say, embracing China and accepting that, yeah, if there is a new world order, we are going to be part of this new club.
Yeah, exactly. The attempt to really revolutionize in a positive way U.S.-India ties began all the way back at the end of the Bill Clinton administration, and it's been a bipartisan effort in Washington and a bipartisan effort in New Delhi since then to bring these two great democracies closer together because of concerns about China, but for other reasons as well. And we really have seen that go up in at least some flames lately. Of course, the tariffs on India, the highest in the world, but also the alienation of India after the war in Kashmir and the claims that that President Trump alone brought peace and some of these other things. And so Modi, who, as you said, has not been to China in 7 years, is there and expressing warmth with Xi Jinping and so forth. I think the saving grace here may be that India and China's structural differences are not going away. And so there's going to be limits to how far the Indians and the Chinese can rush into each other's embrace. But that should be small solace. We should be trying to preserve the U.S.-India relationship, not making it deteriorate.
Richard, for those of you in DC who are, you know, analysing, assessing this kind of the kind of games that China is currently playing, the military parade, exerting its power, bringing its friends and frenemies and allies and partners together to do this. Is there really now, do you believe, an alternate world order that we keep hearing about, that the so-called global South continues to push? Because for the longest time, it did feel like the United States was the only player in town when it came to resolving big conflicts, resolving big issues. Even in the last few months, you know, the Ukrainians turning to the United States saying, we need your help, the Europeans doing the same, despite knowing where Donald Trump sits on a lot of these things. But do you now think that this is a reality?
There's a kind of alternative on offer here, but it's going to take a lot more for it actually to get rolling. So you have to talk about some of the specifics, right? So Russia and China, for example, don't like U.S. alliances, particularly in their backyard. Those alliances aren't going anywhere unless we have something to say about it. They don't like the dependence of the dollar in the global economy, but the dollar dependence is here, at least for the time being. They don't like America's imposition of sanctions. They don't like talk about democracy and why that's a superior form of government than autocratic rule. And they don't like the fact that they can't have spheres of influence of their own. And so there's a lot of things they don't like, and they're trying to offer alternatives, and that is attractive to many, particularly in the global South. But the crazy thing is they're offering these alternatives because of their discontent with global order at the very moment that the administration in Washington also seems discontented with the way the world is ordered. And so they say the United States, the West has been dominating this. This is a smokescreen for domination. But the American side is seeing mostly the costs here. I think that the current world order is getting shabby, but it's here to stay for a while longer. But that ultimately will have more to do with decisions in Washington than abroad.
So, Richard, I mean, what do you think that middle powers like the UK, even Turkey, I mean, we've seen Erdogan currently there in Beijing, should do when, they're trying to reach out to a DC, a Washington that isn't necessarily interested in engaging in the same way that they want and need?
Well, I think that American policy and politics certainly has ups and downs, and sometimes our foreign friends and allies understand that better than some of us in Washington. And so I think it's important to play the long game here. There are things that the current government in Washington doesn't like in our allies, or things in our allies that they don't like in the current government. But the distance between us and them is so much narrower than it is between countries that really do seek an alternate vision of the way the world should be. And those countries are really taking the lead in China at the meeting today.
Richard, always good to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, a race against time as rescue teams head for remote mountain parts of Afghanistan to search for survivors of a devastating earthquake.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Let's go to Afghanistan now, where the Taliban says more than 1,400 people have been killed in a devastating earthquake. The United Nations says rescuers are scrambling in a race against time to reach the mountainous and remote area hit, while warning of an exponential rise in casualties. Well, the 6th magnitude earthquake struck eastern Afghanistan, with the epicenter near the city of Jalalabad. Kunar and Nangarhar provinces have been worst hit by tremors, which were felt all the way from Kabul to Islamabad in neighbouring Pakistan. A second 5.2 magnitude earthquake hit the same region today, causing panic and further hampering rescue efforts. Sky's international correspondent John Sparks reports.
The vigour and the violence of this earthquake is obvious from the air. Where homes and farms once stood, piles of dust and rubble take their place. Village life now transplanted to the surrounding fields. On the ground, the scale of this disaster and its human consequences will take longer to realise. Many here have lost their homes, and many too have lost their loved ones, buried under brick and wood and mud. There are survivors as well, pulled from the wreckage on people's backs and beds. We were under the soil, said this man, then rescued. My wife, my son, my grandchildren were buried under my house. This was God's test. More than 1,400 people have died, says the governing Taliban, a number, according to the UN, that is bound to surge. Rescue teams simply cannot reach the worst affected areas. In a voice note, a doctor from charity Halo Trust describes this logistical nightmare.
The situation was devastating. All the roads were blocked. When they arrived to the scene, there was lots of tremors. Rocks were still falling from the mountains on the main road.
The only source of aid comes from above, a couple of helicopters operated by the Taliban, ferrying in people and supplies and taking the casualties out. The Red Cross says more than 3,000 have been injured. The Taliban is now pleading for financial assistance, but the international community remains wary of them. The UK will provide £1 million to UN agencies, but the Red Cross says that's not enough.
We're already in touch with the European Union. They are trusted partners in delivering humanitarian aid in Afghanistan. So we're hopeful on that front. The big question mark, obviously, is the American government as to whether they will revisit the decision they've made not to provide humanitarian assistance into Afghanistan, given this new, very serious crisis on our hands right now.
The magnitude of human need cannot be disputed. For those buried under the rubble and those likely to be ignored, the Taliban restricts and segregates women and girls. The days ahead will be difficult indeed. John Sparks, Sky News.
Well, as the desperate search for survivors continues, I spoke to the National Director of World Vision Afghanistan, Tamrim Indri de Silva, and began by asking about fears of the number of dead and how it could significantly rise.
From what we understand, there are villages that have still not been able to be accessed, either by foot, and there isn't even space for helicopters to land. They're actually bypassing those to go to areas that are more accessible, and so we are expecting the death toll to rise. It's very early, but it's definitely going to be higher.
When you say it's worse, is it just based on the fact that just how remote the area is?
Yes, it is, because in the very first few hours of the Herat earthquake, we managed to travel in within 2 hours of the earthquake. We were already starting rescue operations. Here, we had to wait almost, 12 to 15 hours just to make sure the roads were cleared. And even though the roads are now cleared, it's still very hard. Vehicles aren't able to go through, so everything is by foot. If vehicles aren't able to get through, that means there's no heavy machinery, even if there were heavy machinery available to support, which means that everything is being done by hand, by shovels and pickaxes and things like that.
And Mr. Silva, it feels like, just like many other natural disasters in Afghanistan, women and girls are bearing the brunt of this particular earthquake.
That is correct. We don't have any estimates of numbers of injured or anything of the sort. But as often times in an earthquake, it is women and girls that are impacted because of the nature of it. In Herat, we saw a lot of women were at home during the day. Now, in this instance, it was in the middle of the night, which meant that all families, the entire family was at home and asleep. So that I'm assuming men and women and boys and girls were all impacted. But the aftermath, it is the women that will suffer more. They will not have the space to cook. They will not have the livelihoods. Livestock would also have been killed. It's not just people who have been affected by the earthquake. So the long-term effects and the impacts on families will certainly have bear a toll more on the women and girls.
Yeah, and I know you have teams on the ground at the moment, but of course, because of the restrictions that female aid workers, health workers and rescuers face, that's impacting things as well. I mean, there aren't any female rescuers at the moment on the ground.
Well, Vision usually is currently working with local partners. What we usually see in this kind of an emergency, particularly with the returning crisis, with the earthquakes and also with the flooding, the authorities have allowed women to be part of the emergency assessments and the rescue operations. Now, this is going to be a different kettle of fish because of the terrain and because of accessibility. It will be harder for women to even rescue, be part of the rescue operations, for female doctors to make sure that they make it through. So everything is a little bit harder for everybody, and it will obviously impact female rescue operations and people as well.
What is it that you now require from the international community? Because we understand the Taliban has also called on the international community to provide more aid.
Yeah. So I do understand that there are countries that are pledging support. There have been local businessmen and people who have been pledging support as well. But we haven't seen funding come in from the international community. There has been funding that's been accessed through the UN, about 5 million through what's known as the SURF, and another 5 million through the Afghan Humanitarian Fund. But besides that, we haven't had any large amounts pledged. 2 or 3 donors have pledged funding. There are medical supplies and airlifts of tents and medicines coming through, but nothing to the scale of what is needed. We estimate that the population of the area affected is about 537,000 people. Now, that is a lot of people that are going to need rebuilding of houses, livestock, food, clothing, a shelter, all those kinds of things. So we're a long way away from supporting them.
Yeah, and thousands of homes have been destroyed. Exactly. Obviously, these homes were in no way earthquake-resistant, built, as earthquake-resistant homes. They were built out of stone and mud in this very cut-off part of the country. And so many people will be left without shelter as well.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing. We're hearing that people are not moving away from their villages. They're staying under tarps and tents and cloth, just in the open. Now, it's okay at this point in time, and even though the weather is a little bit warmer, it is going to be winter in 3 months. And there's a big question of what is going to happen to everybody. Will they remain in their homes, or will they have to be moved? Because, those are things that will have to be looked into. And there is definitely no support to be rebuilding anything at this point in time.
That was Tamindri De Silva, the National Director of World Vision Afghanistan. Now, more than 1,000 people are feared dead after a landslide hit a village in Sudan. The landslide struck a rebel-controlled area of the Mara Mountains in the western Darfur region following days of heavy rain. The Sudan Liberation Movement says the village of Tarasin was completely wiped out, with only one survivor found. Aid organisations, however, are reporting significantly fewer casualties than the rebel group, with details still emerging. The recovery operation will be complicated by the devastating civil war between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces that's engulfed the country. We'll, of course, continue to monitor the aftermath of that landslide over the coming days. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, the leaked plans for the future of Gaza circulating among US officials, which include a voluntary relocation of the Strip's entire population.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation. Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
Those vivid colours of summer have faded now, but the trauma for everyone who witnessed what happened here hasn't gone away.
Devastation. We lost 3 of them.
Ruda Cabana's guilty pleas mean they won't have to relive what they saw in court, but everyone here tells you they'll carry it for the rest of their lives. You see people running red lights time after time after time. This is an offence that sometimes has the most awful of consequences.
When you speed through a pedestrian crossing, there is a risk that you could batter somebody to death. She filled our lives with light. She was innocent, she was happy.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
He had a beautiful death. He fell asleep in my arms. This is about a dying person's choice to die peacefully when they want to, on their terms.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back to the programme. It's the post-war plan for Gaza circulating within the Trump administration that would reportedly see the US administration administer the war-torn territory for at least a decade. Now, the 38-page document made public by the Washington Post suggests Gaza's 2 million strong population would leave at least temporarily through voluntary departures. During that time, the Strip would be rebuilt as a tourist resort and a manufacturing hub. Those who own land would be offered digital tokens in exchange for the rights to redevelop their properties. You'll remember the US president outlined his vision for Gaza's future earlier this year. Here's a reminder of what he said in February.
We're going to take it, we're going to hold it, we're going to cherish it, we're going to get it going eventually where a lot of jobs are going to be created for the people in the Middle East. It's going to be for the people in the Middle East, but I think it could be a diamond, it could be an absolute tremendous asset for the Middle East.
And Mr. President, take it under what authority? It is sovereign territory.
Under the U.S. authority.
Israel is mobilizing tens of thousands of reservists as it prepares to widen its offensive in Gaza City, despite international and domestic opposition to the plans. The conflict has devastated the territory. More than 63,000 people have been killed, and the UN estimates over 90% of residential buildings have been damaged or destroyed. Well, I'm joined now by Omar Shakir, the Israel and Palestine Director at Human Rights Watch. Thank you very much, Mr. Shakir, for joining us here on the programme. You know, this idea of a Riviera in the Middle East, this plan that Donald Trump initially floated, keeps re-emerging, and now this shocking leaked 38-page document that the Washington Post has revealed. It's hard to know whether this is, you know, a distraction or an actual reality emerging.
Look, I think the reality here is that Gaza has been largely turned into rubble, and that has been part of a deliberate policy by the Israeli government to make Gaza unlivable. The reality here is when we talk about, the situation in Gaza, there's nothing voluntary about people leaving. The Israeli government for nearly 2 years has methodically destroyed the vast majority of homes, of schools, of hospitals, of water and electricity infrastructure. It has starved the population. It has killed Palestinians queuing for aid. It has relentlessly bombed and destroyed and killed women and children. And so, this grotesque plan is the result of a reality in which Palestinian lives have been systematically devalued. I mean, this idea that we're just going to, remove the population is only possible because the world has tolerated war crimes, crimes against humanity, and acts of genocide, including a forced displacement inside of Gaza. So the logical next step is, why not just remove Palestinians altogether? It's grotesque, it's deplorable, it's a war crime, it's a crime against humanity, it's ethnic cleansing, and it's only going to stop if states actually act to press the U.S. and Israel to stop this kind of talk and end atrocities.
Yeah, and not just voluntary, removal of the people of Gaza, but this idea that they would be given $5,000 or a digital token to leave their land.
It's again deplorable, because the reality here is the Palestinians in Gaza have lived through nearly 2 years. They know Palestinian history. They know what happened to their grandparents in many cases. The majority of Gaza are refugees. They left their land amid hostilities, and for 75 years they've been denied their right to return. Israel has that as a consistent policy. So the idea that they're going to take a few $1,000s and come back when they want to, nobody believes or trusts Israel, and rightfully so, or the United States. I think the reality here is that the people of Palestine deserve reparations for the grave crime committed against them, but they also have the right to remain on their land. And, we can talk about rebuilding. We should talk about rebuilding, but it makes no sense in the context in which killing and destruction are, as we're speaking today, Gaza City is being under assault. So this glossy presentation about, a Riviera in a context in which Gaza is being destroyed, it does serve in a way to distract from where the energy needs to be, which is ending those atrocities. And then we can sit and talk about how we rebuild Gaza, ensure reparations for the population and ensure that they can live safely in their country.
Yeah, it is extraordinary that these discussions are being had about the so-called day after plan, rather than trying to bring the current situation to an end where, as we said, 63,000 Palestinians are killed as a result of this ongoing war on them, and the hostages still remaining in Gaza, and no resolution. Steve Witkoff saying, well, we'll probably see an end to this by year's end. Without any of these things being resolved, they're already, jumping to the idea of a day after plan and what this so-called Middle East Riviera would look like.
I think that's absolutely right. And again, to so casually say year's end, every day we know dozens of Palestinian women and kids are being killed. Why condemn that why condone that continuing for months on end? And by the way, this is not unprecedented. For more than 3 decades, the world talked about a peace process as the Israeli government continued to steal land, continued to carry out crimes against humanity and war crimes, right? So we're seeing that same playbook happen, which is all this talk and focus on day after. There's going to be no day after for, there already is not for tens of thousands of Palestinians, and there are many more facing starvation and, who literally their lives hang in the balance. And I should add, by the way, that the step that some states have taken to recognize the state of Palestine also risks falling into the same trap, right? Because, what's the point of recognizing what could become a graveyard, right? What are you recognizing if the people are being exterminated, if the territory is being annihilated, if the land is being eaten away and annexed? What's the purpose of that? So I think it's important that states not only focus on those kind of symbolic acts, but they really act concretely and immediately. They're bound to do so under the Genocide Convention. They need to be issuing sanctions on Israeli officials. They should be suspending preferential trade deals. They should be supporting prosecutions at the International Criminal Court. They should be banning trade with settlements. There's a set of steps that might have the chance of stopping this, but certainly this wild talk of a Riviera isn't it.
Omar Shakir, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
Well, that's all from us on The World here tonight. Tomorrow, the leaders of China, Russia and North Korea will stand side by side for a huge military parade. We'll be bringing you those images and analysis live. Good night for now.